Thank you for the kind introduction and for the invitation to talk about sustainability in facilities management. Where do we stand on sustainability in facilities management and facility services? That is the question that I'm posing today and I'm trying to answer. So, as you might see, I'm trying to look from the view of the customers of this trade fair. For those of you that don't know Lünendonk, I will give you a bit of insight that you can see where I'm coming from and what I feel comfortable talking about. Lünendonk is a market research and consulting company, primarily active in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And we're specializing on in-depth analysis of B2B service markets, such as facilities management, but others as well, such as management consulting, tax and audit, digital IT, and the staffing industry. For those of you who want to look up what we do, you will find the so-called Lünendonk lists and market surveys, where we try to provide orientation on B2B business markets. Today, I want to give a broader perspective on sustainability, and I'll try to use a so-called funnel model, where I try to talk about the overarching trends on the example of the German market, and will then come to sustainability a little more in depth within the presentation. As we see it right now, facility management is influenced by 6 major trends. Some of these you may know, some of them we might talk about a bit of them. Of course, sustainability and ESG is in the core of our talk today. However, companies, service provider companies, deal with digitization, with the volatility in the market, with the staff shortage, and with the shift to more user-centered facility management. What do I mean by user-centered facility management? A couple of decades ago, the task was clear: clean, keep the facilities safe, and maintain the technical building equipment. However, as the world changed and turned, we see that lifestyles become more complex, buildings become more complex, and the tasks become more complex. And in the age of personal shortage and staff shortage, real estate providers and owners of real estate, that is the companies, need to provide a user-centered workplace, trying to accommodate the broad variety of the interests, and sustainability has increasingly become a very important topic. Let's just look at the major urban centers such as Amsterdam or Berlin or London, and there you will find a broad variety of lifestyles. And if you want to hire someone for your company, you need to provide them in a sustainable environment. So that's obviously something facility management companies have to address as well. But on the regulatory perspective as well, as you may well know about the European regulation and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which went into effect this year, and which means that companies have to report on their KPIs and their efforts on sustainability. So this is a very important topic, and it is interconnected with digitization, because obviously you can't report on your sustainability efforts if you don't use digital tools. If we talk about facility management, we talk about a very broad range of companies and tasks that go well beyond the classical services such as cleaning. And we've seen this in the pandemic, just to point out one example, where from day to day, you had to provide hygiene concepts and task the infection cases. So this is just one example. We are talking about a very complex environment. The facilities management market is a very stable market, and I've selected the data for Germany. And as we see in the past 12 years, the market volume for 2023 will come out this summer. We've seen a very steady growth. So in difference to the example, the staffing industry, which sees very prominent economic cycles, facility management is a very stable market. which means, of course, that investment and sustainability um, are also viewed in the long term. So we have a very stable customer basis. And if we want to see how the companies are affected, we as a market researcher ask the companies every quarter to provide us with their revenue development. And we see in at least the past 5 quarters, the infrastructure facility management companies, that is those that are specializing in cleaning and security, in greenkeeping, have seen a very stable growth in Germany with 7 to 9.5%. And the prognosis for the first quarter of 2024 is a reduced growth, which is to the lesson of the price effects due to the decrease in inflation. However, if we want to judge sustainability and what companies might be investing in and how their market environment is, we should consider their operating margin. And to illustrate how different the market is and under what environment cleaning companies especially operate, I've tried to show you, I've brought you a slide of the operating profit, the EBIT in Germany. So we see that if you want to address customers and if you want to sell them a cleaning robot or material, they have to naturally focus on price because the average margin is between 2 and 5%, which is not a lot, but fortunately it's very stable. When we ask the companies what are their main challenges and what are the positive and what are the negative developments in the market, then we can see that digitization, that it is progressing, is one of the key figures that the companies find positive, and this is something that I really want to highlight. Uh, when we asked last year, the demand for sustainable services is at an all-time high. A couple of years ago, it was in the 5 to 10% bracket. So we see an increasing demand in sustainability. So sustainability is important, although it has been swept a bit aside by other topics such as the war in Ukraine, the inflation, and other. Demand is still very, very high. What are the things that the companies find as negative developments? Of course, staff shortage and price pressure, two developments I've tried to mention before that influence how companies may act and what they are investing in. And then I had a talk a couple of minutes ago about the use of the future use of robots in cleaning. As obviously we've seen here at Interclean, I've estimated about 25 to 30 suppliers and manufacturers of robotics. And still a lot of people ask, when does a robot in cleaning make sense? Well, it makes sense if the staff shortage continues as it has in the past couple of years. However, as we've seen, the price pressure from customers, and I've shown you the operating margins, are two things that influence cleaning companies heavily. So this will at least influence which of the 25 estimated robotic company we will see in 10 to 15 years and which business models will evolve. I've brought you a couple of slides to increase, and I will go shortly over them so that we have time for some questions. I want to show you one metric. We asked the facility management companies, how important is it really if you have a sustainability concept as a cleaning company? And one of them is that those say that the customers of the provider say, if the provider has a good concept for ESG criteria, then he will have an advantage in when it comes to awarding a contract. And I've shown you, I've brought you two metrics, one for the infrastructure and one for the technical providers. Be not disappointed that the number for the infrastructure companies is a bit lower. This is because most customers see the low-hanging fruits in sustainability, in reducing bare energy consumption, which is the technical building topics. However, as we have a scala which is from -2 to +2, and everything that is beyond the zero line is an indicator that this is a valid trend in the market. One of the advantages that we pride ourselves as a market researcher who's been in the observing the market since the early 2000s, that we do have long-term analysis. We've been asking facility management companies since 2013 how important sustainability and green services are for their business model and what the strategic consequences for them are. And I want to highlight development, and these obviously are fixed answer options that we've given the companies. We've seen since 2017 the share of companies who said this is very important for us. We are working on a fundamental reorganization. We are introducing new products. We are introducing a sustainable service brand is steadily increasing. It is not as much increasing as you might expect from the classical Gartner hype cycle, where it goes up to the roof and then goes to the valley of despair, but it's continually increasing. And as I've tried to highlight in my previous slides, the facilities management market is a somewhat slowly reacting market, so that ever more companies are taking this serious is a strong indication that customers really are into buying sustainable services. So I'm not at all disheartened. I see it as an encouragement for everyone who's in sustainability. I've brought you just some exemplary numbers on how day-to-day facility services can influence the sustainability balance. It really depends which equipment you use. Is it made from recyclable plastics? How much energy consumption does it take? What kind of products you use? And I've walked through the halls of Interclean, and I've seen that many of the suppliers pride themselves of offering sustainable and organic cleaning detergents. So this is very important, but you have other materials as well. You have work clothing, you can source them from renewable and from responsible manufacturers. And you can optimize your disposition of your cleaning staff. Every kilometer, every mile that is not traveled is important. And if you supply them with electric cars, that makes a difference. So it is more than just the cleaning detergent. It is the overall process where you buy your energy from, and how you report these figures to your customers, which obviously becomes ever more important as customers tend to report on their economic footprint through the value chain. And I've brought you two academic models, so to speak, to give a bit of the focus on where we see of this. I've just mentioned it 2 minutes ago, the so-called Gartner hype cycle, which is obviously an invention of the Gartner Research Institute. And every invention, every innovation follows, as to Gartner, and we find it very believable, a clear pattern. You have something that triggers an innovation. Then, in the best case, you have a peak of inflated expectations where everyone speaks about, which is shortly afterwards followed by a confrontation with reality and what works, what doesn't work, and then you have the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. So where does stand sustainability in facilities management is the all-important questions. And if I use these this hype cycle, when we all started talking about sustainability and facility management in earnest, it's closely correlated with the Fridays for Future and Greta Thunberg development. About 2017, 2018, we were about here. Then we had a peak. Everyone was talking about it, trying different things out, saw that not every customer is directly buying into it. But then we have now 2024, 6 to 7 years later, and we have an interclean full of sustainable products, and lots of companies are buying sustainable services and sustainable products. So I think we're somewhere around here um, on this hype cycle. There's still room for development, but everyone should be certain that sustainability is here to stay. And I've brought a little less fancy model, but it is our own. We try to have some quadrant of market cycles. And just to make it short, we see that the establishing phase has been passed in about 2017 to 2021, and now we're in the booming phase where we see lots of products, and we will be coming into a consolidating phase, which is not at all bad, which means business model, business cases will prove themselves, and we will go into another innovation cycles from that moment on. And this was my short introduction on how I see sustainability, and try to give you a bit of insight on where the markets stand and where the demand stands. And I hope you found it a bit of interesting. And if there are any further questions, I'll be here at least the next 30 minutes. So I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much for listening.